President-elect Trump has appointed former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Trump praised Huckabee as a dedicated public servant and leader in faith, noting his strong support for Israel. A popular fast food chain is closing many of its stores. Wendy's says 140 underperforming and outdated stores across the country will close by the end of the year. Currently, there are just over 6,000 Wendy's locations across the country. A new Louisiana law that requires the Ten Commandments to be posted in public school classrooms is temporarily on hold. Opponents sued, arguing that it's a violation of the separation of church and state. A federal judge agreed and has approved a preliminary injunction. And a new poll shows grandchildren are helping seniors avoid loneliness. The poll from the University of Michigan shows that 72% of seniors with grandchildren rarely feel isolated, which is 10% higher than those without grandkids. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
New Schools for New Orleans, along with Allstate Sugar Bowl and Entergy New Orleans, would like to send a huge congratulations to our class of 2024 New Orleans Excellence in Teaching Award honorees. This year, we had 90 Teachers of the Year from each public school in New Orleans. Each of them was recognized at our annual gala, where we had over 350 attendees. We're excited to also share that each honoree is receiving a $1,000 classroom grant. Thank you for everything you do, teachers.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning. Wake up, New Orleans.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. My co-host in studio is
Senator Wesley Bishop. Good morning, New Orleans.
And behind the glass, holding me all the way down, is super producer Nyron Sanders. Good morning, Nyron. Listen, I wanted to open today's show with scripture, Proverbs 27:5. It says, open rebuke is better than secret love. I wanted to open it with that because I need folks to understand this about Dr. Wyatt. I welcome all forms of criticism. I like the glowing criticism. I like the growing criticism because it does nothing but help me improve on who I am. But I need y'all to know something else. I know who I am and I know whose I am. I am very, very grounded in understanding that I get better every single day. I have decided that I'm gonna stick with love because hate is far too great of a burden to bear. So I'm not even angry these days. I'm very happy. I'm very blessed, and that's how I wanted to start my day because I was driving to work listening to Kirk Franklin. He has a song with Glorilla. I wasn't listening to that one, but I was listening to something about the name Jesus. And you know, I think people are confused when it comes to me. I worry not about people who have private things to say about Dr. Wyatt. I really rather you be open about it because everything that you say, whether good, bad, or indifferent, helps me grow. And I don't really worry or waste my time, you know, covering my back because God holds me down all the time. And I want y'all to know that I'm extremely imperfect. I make mistakes all the time. But one thing about me that might separate me from a lot of people is I can own mine. And I can acknowledge mine. I don't throw daggers and hide my hands. I speak and I stand on what I say. And so even if standing on it, if it's wrong, I'm going to stand on it again and apologize and make it right. So I wanted to open with that scripture. And I thought about that scripture because when I was working for Harney, I was the principal CEO of Harney. And when I was going through my issues with the board in the moments when I lost my job, I had a staff member, Willie Gray. Shout out to Willie Gray. And when he spoke on my behalf at the hearing, that is the scripture that he used. And immediately when I heard it, tears started coming. I couldn't understand why, but it all made sense. Open rebuke is better than secret love. So if you love somebody, love them out loud. And if you want to rebuke somebody, go to God first and ask him for his guidance, because that's what I've learned to do. I don't live like I used to, and I'm a happier person. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the Good Morning Show. So look, we always talk about politics here, and Trump is President-elect Donald Trump. is shoring up his cabinet picks and his administration, and I saw that Elon Musk was chosen for a cabinet pick. I think it's very telling what is happening in terms of how he's lining up these folk to run these departments and to head certain things. I know Kennedy is vying for a spot in his cabinet. I thought I heard that our governor was actually also vying for a spot in his cabinet, but I learned yesterday that he put out a statement saying that he had no interest.
Bobby Jindal as well.
That is scary. And so I don't know what's going to happen in the coming days. I do know that the Harris-Walz campaign is in talks about some sort of audit of the election day outcome. I don't know what's happening. All I can tell you is just be very mindful of the terrain that we are getting ready to walk through in the next 4 years, specifically around federal protections. I hear that it's his goal to give the states, the opportunity to decide certain things that the federal government typically decides.
Correct.
Which is scary. Things such as the Department of Education. We understand that if that is a state directive or initiative here, we are in trouble in the state of Louisiana.
And Doc, also my understanding is that Cade Brumley, the current Secretary of Education here in the state of Louisiana, is also on the short list for the Trump administration.
Listen, I get a little agitated every time I hear a new name because none of the names align with equity. Which brings me to my next point. He did this presser the other day, maybe it was yesterday, and he was talking about giving basically reparations to anybody who was affected by diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he's talking specific to our white populace of people who, and I thought it was so strange, but I thought it was very strategic and I thought it was very intentional because he understands that the conversations around reparations for Black folk have been going on for centuries. And to then come out and say, if a university or organization is using equity tactics and white folk feel harmed by that, then they could sue.
Flip the script.
Yeah. Well, you could flip it when you write the script, when you control the script, when you control the narrative. So you can absolutely flip it. But what do you think about reparations for folk who? How could any diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives harm anybody?
That doesn't make any sense.
You have the floor.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I had not heard that before you had just mentioned it, but just my initial response to that. One thing that you've seen over the last several years, I have several friends of mine who work in higher education. I spent about 25 years working in higher education, and particularly a lot of your larger PWIs, predominantly white institutions. You see offices of diversity and inclusion is popping up. A buddy of mine is the vice president of student affairs at the University of North Dakota, and he and I talk on a regular basis. And so that is actually under his portfolio to handle diversity issues, and those deal with students of color, those deal with Indian students, those deal with the LGBT community. You see a lot of that going on, I guess, around the country with universities trying to be more inclusive, and not just to benefit just the university, but also it also helps with their retention efforts and trying to actually get in. So to hear that being said by the president-elect is alarming. Doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. However, it plays, I think, to his base. We've talked about speaking in code and what he says and what he does not say. But for those individuals who over the years have had issues with the fact that, the Black population are asking that we receive reparations, and that's been going on for quite some time. So now to kind of flip that script and throw out there, well, you aren't the only individuals who should qualify for this particular strategic effort that's been going on around the country to increase the numbers of equity and inclusion and diversity. Well, we feel as if that's been actually hurting us, and we've seen this, particularly over the last several years, being talked about a lot. So to now open the door to have those reverse conversations, and I'm sure you'll see it play out a great deal during these months where we're talking about what the new administration is going to look out. I think it's very telling, and it's something that we'll be talking about, I think, for quite some time. That it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and we'll make sure that we have to kind of beat that back and stand against those kind of idiotic things that are coming out of this administration.
Well, if you have not heard about what the conversation is focused on at this moment, here's the article. It says Trump doubles down on eliminating education department, vows to give restitution to victims of DEI. And it says President-elect Donald Trump intends to fulfill his promise to eliminate the United States Department of Education, among other actions that will have sweeping impacts on public education and American students. The 45th and soon to be 47th president said that very early in his second administration, he would be closing up the department headquartered in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children because they'll do a much better job of it, Trump says to the states. He said of the federal agency, you can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom. And so what you're hearing, I want y'all to be very, very mindful of what you're hearing. Most of the time, they take the ideas of their counterparts and they spend them, because that's what we've been saying this entire time, specific to our charter school structure here. There's a lot more money, a lot more resources, and yet our children are doing worse. And so now he's taken that same comment and he's flipped it to say that the Department of Education, with all of the money and all of the resources, clearly can't get our children from being 50th in education. And so he's going to dismantle the department and send those rights and privileges of governing education to the states. And if he does that here, if he does it, what is going to happen here will be catastrophic. I need you to understand that, because there is a very, very strong push to privatize education all across this nation. And they just happen to start with the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana first, because they had all of the right ducks in a row here. And if Kay Brumley is being tapped to do anything in the cabinet of the president-elect, I don't know what he would do if he closes the Department of Education. Maybe the Secretary of Education, maybe he'd be the new Betsy DeVos, but I don't know what he would tap him to do. But my question would be, and maybe since you're a political pundit, my question would be, if you close the Department of Education, am I still responsible for my student loans? That's my question. I want to know that. Like, that's a real question. Folk who have, because we do know that if he closes the Department of Education, the loan forgiveness program will shutter its doors. The graduation plus loans, the parent plus loans, all of those loans that you get to supplement for your child's education come through the federal government. The ones that come through the federal government will be no more. So then if you're doing that, am I responsible for my student loans?
I don't know the answer to that question. Just from a legal point of view, I'm assuming that whomever it is that he has that's dealing with that, at some point in time, they'll try or be asked to address that particular question. I don't know if they would consider it to be a private debt or exactly what, or whether or not the debt can be co-signed to someone else. I don't know if that's even possible regarding that. What caught my attention when I first heard that there was, I guess, several individuals from Louisiana who were being considered, particularly, I guess, Kay Brumley with particularly the Secretary of Education, it seemed to be inconsistent, because he's talked about potentially closing the Department of Education throughout this entire campaign. But to then, I guess, have individuals or select individuals to be being considered to be Secretary of Education, I don't know what his overall plan is. I don't know if as the Secretary of Education for the state of Louisiana, if that's going to be his point person, what will the role of that point person be in the absence of the Department of Education? I don't know yet. They haven't discussed that as much, and so we haven't been able to look at that yet to see where it are. But I think, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, being able to look very closely as to what's going on, and not just these announcements as to particular people who are being considered, but exactly what their role would be in this supposedly newfangled look at particularly the Department of Education here in the state of Louisiana and around the country.
I think it's very telling that he ran on one platform initiative. And then the moment he was considered to be the president-elect, every talking point of his has been a note from the book of Project 2025. Even though he tried to disassociate himself with it, he tried to distance himself from it, he tried to act as if he didn't know what was in the document, that his name was mentioned over 300 times, that although all of the people who put it together are former people from his former cabinet, it is very telling to me and eye-opening to a lot of folk who gave him his vote, that now he's enacting all of the policies that are inside of that document, because to close the Department of Education is literally in Project 2025. Absolutely. And so I think this is a FAFO moment for a lot of people, because you messed around and now you about to find out, because a lot of folk, particularly in our Latin communities, are now it's trending. The how can I change my vote is trending. And that goes to show you what people understand about the voting process. There's no way to change your vote, but it's literally a trending topic, because people are Googling and looking up, can I change my vote, or how can I change my vote? And it's because they're now realizing that what he said prior to getting elected as the president and what he's saying now are polar opposites. And I don't understand how they fell for the banana in the tailpipe.
Let's just make it real, and let's just go. We ain't got to go beyond New Orleans to understand what I'm about to say. One, folks fell for the okie doke, and the reason why some folks fell for the okie, because they were willing to actually do that. He's not talking about anything now that he hadn't even talked about or hinted at over the last several years. So this really shouldn't surprise you. Somebody said a long time ago, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Well, Maya Angelou said that, but also too though. This idea of how do I change my vote? Like that, to me, that speaks to why we need civics back in our schools. That speaks to why we need an educated voter populace, because I think this election showed us that many people took advantage of people's misunderstanding or ill-informed understanding of the voting process and what that looks like and what that means. And in my opinion, just based on a lot of the appointments he's making, it seems like there's a lot of quid pro quo going on in terms of supporting him. You get rewarded with a cabinet spot. You funded him, you get rewarded with a cabinet spot. I thought my understanding of government was that too was illegal, to be able to reward people or to promise them things in exchange for appointments.
To be quite honest with that, to give you my personal opinion, that comes to play. If Kamala Harris were going to appoint, you probably would have seen some of that. Some of the most strongest individuals who were surrogates out there, typically you see those individuals being awarded. And it's not so much with them being awarded per se as far as Kamala is concerned. Part of the thought was that you typically have surrogates that are out there that kind of see things from your point of view, who can then talk from your point of view and see exactly what's going on. And then you'll see those individuals playing particular roles, oftentimes strategic roles in the new administration.
Well, we have to go to break, and I'm very excited about talking to Dr. Silas Lee at the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to talk about post-election reflection, and maybe I can pick his brain because he is one of the political minds, and I want to pick his brain and ask these questions about these appointments, about where do we go from here? What can the Democratic Party do to regroup? Is there an opportunity for the Democratic Party to regroup? We'll have that and more right here on WBOK 1230 AM.
What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long.
I'm Daryl Forges with WDSU News, and here's your headlines. Mimosas, wine, and hotel itineraries. Those are all key details investigators at the Public Integrity Bureau tracked down while looking into former NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie. WDSU obtained a report that claims Vappie may have violated rules by drinking with the mayor at the French Quarter. Restaurants, while on the clock. Investigators used videos and even got the receipts from the restaurant to reach their conclusion. Investigators also use hotel itineraries that they think show Vappie and Cantrell plan to share a hotel room for a trip to Singapore that ended up being canceled, thus implying the two were in a personal relationship. New Orleans police are asking for your help after two women were attacked within 2 days of each other on the City Park path. We're told what police believe to be a Hispanic suspect exited a golden car and tried to abduct a woman who was jogging. That incident and the other happened along the Wisner path. And while the NOPD does not believe the cases are connected, they still want you to be on high alert. Police have increased patrols in that area. We're hearing from the Orleans Parish Sheriff after an audit alleged her department used $250,000 on overtime during Mardi Gras last year. The OIG released the report Tuesday, saying off-duty details must be worked in an efficient and uniform manner that ensures safety and incorporates best practices. Sheriff Susan Hudson calls a portion of the OIG report and her department's off-duty detail a, quote, inaccurate legal interpretation. I'm Gerald Forges, and that's your headlines for WBOK.
NOLA Public Schools' main round enrollment for kindergarten through 12th grade is now open. With 73 schools available through the NOLA Public Schools Common Application Process, or NCAP, finding the right school fit for your family is easier than ever. List up to 12 choices to maximize your chances and apply by January 24th. We're all in, and we hope you are too. Apply today at enrollnolaps.com. That's enrollnolaps.com.
WBOK and LCMC Health are proud to present the Keeping You Well Cafe, 60 minutes of LCMC Health, where doctors speak directly to the people of New Orleans. LCMC Health is committed to improving the quality of health care in the New Orleans area, the Gulf South, and beyond. The Keeping You Well Cafe is another way for LCMC Health to engage with the community. Over the next few months, LCMC Health will join WBOK and local businesses to answer your health and wellness questions. Through this partnership, LCMC Health will provide resources to the community, including subject matter experts from the hospitals that will share expertise on health concerns and wellness practices to help you live your best life. Tune in to WBOK during the last hour of the reality check, or catch us at lcmchealth.org and follow us on social media.
Greetings, WBOK family. This is Jason Clark, host of United Way and You. Be sure to tune in next Thursday at 12 p.m. when we'll be speaking with Melanie Richardson, co-founder and executive director of Training Grounds, a United Way funded partner. The topic will be the We Play, We Connect Family Resource Hub. Please tune in if you're able. Until then, we only have one life to live, so live united.
This is Andronika Morris, host of Put Housing First. Join us every Tuesday at 12 o'clock, where we will discuss how housing affects every aspect of our lives and what's necessary, what's needed to guarantee housing for all. Join us every Tuesday at 12 o'clock as we dig down deep onto the issues that affect all of us.
Tune in this Friday, November 15th at 8 a.m. to hear Liberty Bank and Trust discuss customized banking solutions. Power your dream and fuel community growth. Tune in this Friday, November 15th at 8 a.m. on The Good Morning Show.
Sunday mornings are reserved for a good word on WBOK. This Sunday, be sure to catch Dr. Kevin Stevens Sr., the pastor of Christian Unity Church, for service and a powerful, full, inspiring word. Listen live every Sunday morning right here on WBOK.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
Welcome back. Good morning and welcome back to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. In studio with me is
Senator Wesley Bishop. Good morning.
Behind the glass, holding me down is Nyron Sanders, super producer Nyron Sanders. If you're just joining us, we are having conversations about President-elect Donald Trump's staffing of his cabinet, so to speak, and the appointments that he's making. And one of the big things that we're talking about is the realization that Project 2025 is absolutely real. Although he tried to disassociate himself from it, he tried to say he had no knowledge of it. He didn't have any dealings with the guys who were putting this document together. He is now, in every commentary that he's doing, having a real live conversation about the implementation of Project 2025. And one of the big ideas that stand out for me is his attempts at shuttering the Department of Education. And so even though he's made this bold declaration that he's going to close up the department, here is what the opponents have to say about it. It says, Trump's vow to eliminate the Department of Education faces a procedural hurdle. Congress would have to pass legislation to do so, and Republicans don't have enough votes in the United States Senate to pass a bill without eliminating the filibuster. That is highly unlikely, said Cross. However, she cautioned that Trump could essentially kill the department through executive actions, including dramatically defunding the agency and eliminating positions and programs. So even though he may not be able to technically close its doors, what the article is saying is he can severely underfund it to the point where it cannot function normally. Any elimination of or dramatic decrease in funding for education, for the education department, will ultimately burden states with funding education for millions of students, which is, I think, his goal. When you push things over to the states and says states' rights, it gives us echoes of Jim Crow.
Absolutely.
States have always been the battlefield, and I think they're going to be even stronger battlefield right now. And that is coming from the article from the Griot, talking about the possibility of closing up the Department of Education.
Doc, let me jump in just for a second, and I want to just remind folks, when you were looking at on election night and you saw those electoral maps, one thing that became very obvious was the number of red states that we saw, I guess, around the country. What that's, I guess, symbolic of and reality is that most of those red states have Republican-dominated legislatures in both the House and the Senate. So when we hear this conversation talking about attempting to or pushing rights back down to the states, if the states already controlled by Republican-dominated legislatures, particularly when you look throughout the South, the entire South, I want to say, other than, let me back up, I think every place in the South, even the state of Georgia, I believe, also have Republican-dominated legislatures. The only reason why you would even throw that out there is because you know what the outcome is going to be if you leave it to the individual senators and representatives and oftentimes governors who run those particular states. So it would simply be a rubber stamp of actually what was going on in the White House.
If you want to join in on this conversation, the number here is 504-582-9422. We are having conversation about President-elect Donald Trump and his appointments of his cabinet members and those to lead certain agencies and departments in his new administration. The article that I was referencing and the Cross woman that I was referencing is Democratic strategist Amicia Cross. That is her commentary about we will go back, in essence, to shadows of Jim Crow if we allow the states to determine educational rights for students. And we do have a caller on line one, Ms. Jones. Good morning. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning, Ms. Jones.
You all, good morning to the listening audience. And this is from the Pearly Book, Deceiving and Being Deceived. Now they want to try to change their votes. Too late. I always emphasize about Russia and the United States and Putin and Trump. That alone should have scared people to death. It's just so horrible. Now you want to see it? They've been deceived, and there's going to be more deception going on. It's not finished yet.
Oh, yeah, that's the scary part.
I'm sorry?
That's the scary part, because he's just getting started.
It is. It is. And, that's why through the years, children, high school hadn't had things like civics and to learn about the country that you live in spite of what it did to us. We still embrace it with love. But for those who now see it, they must have been in a trance or something. I kept saying something just didn't look right in the people's eyes. Their brain showing. What are you thinking about? Now the cover is open and it's on, but God let you go so far. And he knows how to put a stop sign.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. We appreciate your commentary.
Ms. Jones, let me just jump in a second just to kind of echo some of what you're saying. what's so unfortunate about this particular piece is that we talked a second ago, and we mentioned that Maya Angelou was the one who said when people show you who they are, you actually don't need to believe them. What's so unfortunate about a situation in this piece is that people voted, but I think part of the thought was that people thought what he was saying didn't necessarily apply to them. Yeah, he's saying this craziness. He's saying this absurdity. He's talking about the closing the Department of Education. He's talking about deporting families and children and things along those lines. But folks felt as if for some reason or another, what he was saying didn't apply to them. That applies to somebody else. When you talk about all that stuff there, none of it applies to me. So now when he comes and he's simply echoing what he's been saying for the last year or so, for some people to say, why this is what he's saying. It doesn't make any sense. This really should not have applied to me. It always intended to apply to you. You thought that it didn't apply. You thought you were somehow beyond what it was that he was saying. And that's what's so unfortunate about it. When we talk about and we look at the results of the election, and we look at just the raw numbers of white women, while most of the numbers that we looked at led us to believe that white women would be more apt to support the vice president, when we look at those numbers weren't correct. When we look at places like Wisconsin and Michigan and other places where the numbers prior to the election led us to believe that she would be able to be successful. And then we look at those raw numbers, and the raw numbers show that those individuals who were given lip service to being able to support the vice president didn't practice what they were supposedly preaching. So we actually see exactly what's going on now, and people are having now to deal with the consequences because this guy's doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
Good morning, Lindell. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Well, looks like the way we came in is the way we're going out.
Talk about it.
Disenfranchisement after disenfranchisement, right? And we keep looking at these folk and we keep talking about what they did and how, we got to take some responsibility too. I've said it a million times. We have organizations, and I'm going to call names. I don't care, Bozo, Dub, all these people or whatever. You don't hear from those folk until it's the election time, right? Why don't we go ahead and start educating our folk during the Trump campaign for 8 years, even when there was no election? We don't take a play out of no one else's playbook. They look at the enemy's playbook. They're telling you what they're going to do, and you don't prepare yourselves for it within 8 years. We had 4 years of him already, right? We saw some of the things that he did during that time or attempted to do, right? We've had control of the Senate. We've brought in people. Now, let me tell you something. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm Democrat, but I started feeling like I'm tired of being on a losing team. Not saying that I'm trying to jump over on the other side. I'm just tired of being on a losing team. And then after we lose, we keep coming back like a Dennis Allen, with these woe it's me stories or whatever. But we have to take responsibility for some of our own things. You put Merrick Garland in there, one of the slowest AGs I've ever seen, to let these prosecutions just ride on molasses. We had control of a lot of things. We didn't do anything when we had control of the House or the Senate that would say, hey, look, we're going to make sure that those things he tried before won't happen by him or anyone else in the future. And we're scared. We can't they're not scared at all. We ought to take some of what they have, the balls, the gumption that they have, and do the things that they do to us. But we keep trying to play nice and fair guy all the time, and it doesn't work. And people are it's like a relationship. You know what? We can be in it for so long, but after a while, we just fall out of love. There's nothing, but we're not growing. You're not bringing anything to the table. I don't learn anything from my mate. I'm talking about the organizations who don't teach us anything. The doctor just said a minute ago through Dr. Wyatt, she said an uneducated populace. Well, we have folk here who can do those things. Why not do that? Have town hall meetings, educate them. Let's talk about the Electoral College vote and why the popular vote matters in association with the Electoral College vote. Why not have gone for a push to get rid of the Electoral College vote? We should have done that as Democrats, maybe started 8 years ago. This is almost ridiculous. Now there's no election fraud at all because they won. But they planted the seeds and we did nothing to... I can't be afraid with you, Dr. Wyatt. With regard to your question, excuse me, as it relates to the money that you'd have to pay back with the student loans. And you know this, student loans, some of the money comes from the government, some come from banks and other private. The money's not going to go. We're going to have to pay that money back. They didn't want Biden to forgive loans.
Correct.
You think they're going to say, okay, we're going to let the money go along with that? Nah, they want the money. Plus the banks, they're going to want their money too, because everybody's making a profit now. So the money part, we're on the hook for it. You know, sorry. But I think it's about time we start taking some responsibility too. And like Senator said, he told us what he was going to do. He showed us who he was. They just didn't believe Dr. Angelou. I'm finished.
Yeah, thank you, Lindell. We
you,
appreciate
Lindell.
your call. Good morning, Norm. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good
I'm
morning.
great.
Good. So, here's what I've been looking at two things. Well, several things. One is that in one way, we have to let the process just flow out. It is. What America did was.
Norm, your connection is bad. We cannot make out what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Try that again.
Yeah, I said, first of all, this guy is this Donald Trump was a screw up. And these people elected him. So what is he going to do? For the next, he's going to screw everything up, from our entire foreign policy, everything. And who's he going to go to war with? He's going to want to go to war with China. And who's he going to take to fight this war? The very same people that he disenfranchised here when they go to war, then they come back here and can't vote. No, this country is, I told Gerald the other day, I said, we're being exterminated. You think about it. You ever heard of this phrase called Laban Serum? Laban Serum. It is a phrase called living space. It's where people conquer each other. It's a Nazi term. It's what's being done in Gaza and the Gaza Strip, where they're coming in and snatching people's property and exterminating them. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening here. They're going to deport 22 million people, and they're not going to stop there. Guess who else is next? Laban Serum, like I said, pull that phrase up. And think about what can be there's a procedure that's being done right now in Gaza called a computer program called Lavender, okay? And Lavender targets people, okay? That computer program was developed here in the United States. So what they're going to do is use computer one of the programs is called Where's Your Daddy? And so that program is going to pull this stuff up. It's going to be used here, and it's to target people and remove them from their homes and move them from their property and send them wherever they're going to send them, because they're not going to go back to Haiti or to Guatemala or wherever they come from. And we're going to be targeted. We've already targeted our healthcare professionals, and I've talked about that before, called in about that before. And if you want to eliminate a population, what do? You eliminate your healthcare professionals, and that's happening right now as we speak, and we say very little about it. So, we got a guy again who is just a screw up. What we do about it, I don't know if it's too late to do anything about it, other than the fact that we got to resist. And how we resist, I can't give you an answer on that, but we have to resist because we're back to apartheid.
Thank you, Norm.
We're back to the Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Cedric. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning. Good morning. I hate to kind of deviate away from the national, what the Republicans are doing nationally, but look at what they're doing here in the state. We are in a pickle, as our elderly people would say. Now, how do we shift it? Midterm elections are coming. Now, we know that's 2 years from now, and we got to survive until then, but it is incumbent upon the Democratic Party to change their strategy and to start thinking about getting some of these seats in Congress. we're in a pickle, and it's just sad that a lot of folk did not vote. And at this point, lastly, what are we going to do here in New Orleans? We got a mayoral race coming up, and we need our community leaders to get together, and we need to draft us a candidate or two so it won't be 3 or 4 running against one candidate that's not an African American. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric.
Thank you, Cedric.
Listen, it's always a good time, Cedric, to talk about local elections because those, to me, have the most direct impact on us. So even though we're having a national conversation regarding Trump's appointments or prospective appointments, it's always a good time to talk about local election. And to Lindell's point, and I appreciate people like Lindell who call the radio station WBOK, lift their voice and speak truth to power, because we have to start holding folks accountable to what they do that have the outcomes that we do not like in our communities. He named a number of organizations who are political powerhouses in this community, and we've watched them time and time again either get back a candidate that we know isn't in the best interest of us or be silent on issues that matter to us. I want to know where all of those organizations were when we had the gubernatorial race here. I didn't see many people supporting the candidate, Sean Wilson, Dr. Sean Wilson. I didn't see it. I can remember when the governor, our former governor, was running. I saw almost every influential black politician escorting him all through this city, all through this state. I did not see the same for Sean Wilson. And it's time for us to hold us accountable, because what I do know is we could not get in this position without the complicity of us. And every time there's a way to destroy us, they send us for us. And I want to say that again. Every time black folk are being torn down, they send black folk for black folk. They can't do this without our complicity. This could not happen without black folk jumping on the bandwagon and supporting these ideologies of the far right. It could not happen. And so we absolutely, Shedrick, have to take responsibility for the outcomes that we see. And I don't know about a woe is me mentality and the pity party that we're throwing. No, we need to hold folks accountable. What do you say about that?
I think there's a great deal of substance to what you just said. I think that when we take a look, particularly in diagnosing the last gubernatorial election, what you said has been repeated by a lot of individuals. And we talk about Sean Wilson, who probably was one of the more qualified folks who had ever run for governor, just based on both his academic and his political and his policy strategies that he had put in place during the last 8 years under Governor John Bell Edwards, but particularly here in the city of New Orleans. We understand that if you're running for a statewide office here in Louisiana, New Orleans is where your campaign basically begins and ends based upon the sheer volume of individuals who are needed. We look at New Orleans, we look at Baton Rouge, we look at Shreveport. That's where the abundance of voters, particularly voters of color, tend to come here in the state of Louisiana. We also understand that when you look at rural areas of the state of Louisiana, the exact same policies and the playbook that the local Republican Party used to elect the governor is what the Trump administration used to get his votes in there. So there's nothing new about what's going on here in the state of Louisiana. It's just a matter of how we're going to respond to it.
Listen, there's a lot of conversation to be had, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about President-elect Donald Trump's appointments of his cabinet and leadership positions. We'll have more of that conversation on the other side of the break. This is WBOK 1230 AM.
What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long.
This is your news update for WBOK 1230 AM from WDSU. For all your news and weather, watch WDSU News, New Orleans' leader in live, local, late-breaking news. Today at noon and 4 p.m.
Today is a WDSU First Warning Weather Impact Day. There's a chance for showers and thunderstorms late morning into early evening. Some of these could be on the strong to severe side, and we could possibly see flooding, low threat for tornadoes and strong winds. Highs will make it into the low 80s. After that, a cold front moves in late tonight into early Thursday, putting us near seasonal temperatures for the end of the week. For the WDSU First Warning Weather Center, I'm Raven Richard.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
Welcome to Chemical of the Month, a service of the community scientist and Rise St. James. This month, we're focusing on lead, a heavy metal that's dense, soft, and poses serious health risks. In Cancer Alley, lead exposure from industrial emissions or contaminated soil can significantly increase cancer risks and other health problems. Stay informed and protect your health. For more information, visit risestjames.org.
People's Health has a new Medicare plan designed for people with diabetes, chronic heart failure, or cardiovascular disorders. It features a monthly over-the-counter allowance, lower costs for a number of prescriptions, and lower specialist copays than non-special needs plans from People's Health. To learn more about a chronic special needs plan, call 1-800-342-2147. Plans are insured through United Healthcare Insurance Company or one of its affiliated companies, a Medicare Advantage organization with a Medicare contract. Enrollment in the plan depends on the plan's contract renewal with Medicare.
I'm Howard Robertson, creator and CEO of the Play Ode mobile app. Somebody said it takes a village, and Black Radio is the village voice of the Black community. Get in on Play Ode, entertained, inspired, informed, and engaged. Hear your music on some of America's best radio stations, podcasts, news and info, wherever you go. For Black Radio like it was meant to be, download PLAYODE.
The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation is the nonprofit organization that owns the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival presented by Shell. With the funds generated from Jazz Fest, the foundation invests in Louisiana companies through economic development, cultural enrichment, and free educational programs. To learn more about what the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation does, please visit www.jazzandheritage.org.
Hello, WBOK listening audience. This is Pastor Robert Tanner of the Community Church of River Ridge, Louisiana, inviting you to tune in to our Sunday morning broadcast at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning right here on WBOK 1230 AM. That's Community Church with Pastor Robert Tanner every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on WBOK 1230.
Good morning, wake up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. In studio with me is
Senator Wesley Bishop. Good morning, New Orleans.
Behind the glass, holding us all together, is super producer Nyron Sanders. If you are just joining us, we are talking about President-elect Donald Trump's appointment of his cabinet members or his heads of departments. And we didn't get to talk about this guy that he's tapped, Tom Homan, a former Border Patrol agent who rose to lead Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will be his next border czar, overseeing mass deportations promised during the campaign. He is the guy that we spoke briefly about yesterday when he was doing an interview, and the journalist asked him, how are you guys going to handle the separation of families? Like, what is the plan in terms of separating families? Is there a way to do that? And he said very calmly, he said yes. And he took a pause and he said, families can be deported,
the entire family,
together. Yes. And so this is what we're dealing with, like all of these appointments and all of these people who lean to the extreme right, he's putting in places of absolute power in terms of his administration. He has also tapped Elon Musk to lead the efficiency, to head Elon Musk and the guy that was also running for president, Vivek. What is his name? Vivek or something?
I know you're talking about.
Vivek, or however you pronounce his name. It's supposed to be him and Elon Musk to run the efficiency department. And if you understand what that means, like he's putting him in place to talk about inflation, to handle inflation, is a push to reduce the corporate tax rate. Wow.
Doc, let me jump in just a second. Along with the particular office that you just spoke of as far as Elon Musk is concerned, I also believe that he's playing even a far greater role with the Trump administration. My understanding is that, one, most of the announcements that you're hearing about at various appointments, one, he's basically using Elon Musk to vet many of these individuals. And most of those recommendations that you're seeing being announced, they've already gone through this process. And much of the process was actually going on even prior to him being elected. So he's actually feeding these appointments to President-elect Trump. And that's what's so unfortunate. So what you're seeing basically is a rubber stamp of what he's suggesting.
This is very scary. And so, like, just to pivot to how that looks locally when we talk about when white supremacy wants to wave its hands of power against us, they always find somebody who looks like us to be able to help them along the way. And we saw that happening in our local school board races. I'm certain we're going to see some of that happen in our upcoming mayoral race, because what we have to understand is they can't tap any old person to be able to do their bidding. They have to tap somebody that they feel is going to go along with the agenda that they have planned. So even though you may win the seat, quote unquote, in quotation marks, the seat doesn't belong to you, because now you're going to have to pay the piper. Because if they fed all of this money into your campaign for no other reason other than they want the power of the seat, then you have to understand that you don't really have an actual voice in terms of owning that seat or being the person to dictate what that seat does. And I think it's very scary that some of us can be sold for so cheap, bought and sold for so cheap. And it's just disturbing to me that many of us don't have any willpower about ourselves or any integrity about ourselves that we could allow somebody to tap us to do their bidding. We saw it in the well, I know I saw it. I'm gonna say I'm not gonna say we. I saw it in the local school board races, and that is why people who get into these races and they just come out of nowhere. You've never heard their names anywhere. You've never, been in a meeting with them. They've never spoken on an issue. You have to be very wary of those sorts of people. Where did you come from? Who sent you? And what is your issue here? Like, why the school board race? These are the kind of questions I wish more of us will ask before we simply endorse people because they live next door to us, or they're in the same sorority as us, or they cousins with our cousin, or some foolishness like that, because our children's very livelihoods depend on it.
Well, I think when we talk about, I guess, politics, we talk about endorsements and things along those lines, particularly this race, I guess, that we just had, oftentimes, and like I said, I've been a student of politics for a minute, so I always watch to see what's going on. And oftentimes, a lot of what happens really shouldn't surprise you if we take a look at it. Usually the Friday elections always, the qualifying ends at Friday right around 4 or 5 o'clock. And there is usually always some candidate that gets into the race that you've never heard of before. And their name is in there. You're trying to figure out where they're coming from. And usually if you take a look at it, there is some angle to that. There may be somebody that's already qualified to run. And so then you may have that person who may be attempting to pull away votes from that particular individual. You may have somebody that's actually who's qualified to run as well. You know what? We can't just let that person win and get a free walk-in. So let's put somebody else in the race. People watch this very, very particularly. And if you follow not just local politics, but what's going on in New Orleans, what's going on in Baton Rouge, what's going on in Shreveport and around the country, because you see this happening on a particular regular basis. For anybody that's actually been even close to the political process, process, whether you've won, whether you've lost, or whether you've been indifferent. It takes a hell of a lot to run a campaign, and it takes money to run a campaign. So if someone typically runs at the very last minute, if they don't have the resources to run what you might call a credible campaign, then the question is that, well, how does this person plan on funding their campaign? And often, as Doc hinted at a few minutes ago, there's some money that's coming from somewhere if this person is attempting to run. And if you can follow the money and see where that's coming from, if you don't see the organization, if you don't see the support, if you don't see the track record of working in the community that oftentimes can help you with your name recognition, it's going to be difficult to win that race.
Jacqueline, there's a comment in the chat by Jacqueline Wilmore. She said there is not an efficiency department in the federal government. Yes, you're absolutely correct. But guess what the president-elect is trying to do? Great. Donald Trump unveiled a slate of new economic plans Thursday, including the creation of a government efficiency commission that he said Elon Musk has agreed to lead if the former president is elected in November. So this was already a plan, Jacqueline, that he was going to create this government efficiency commission, and he's going to tap Elon Musk to head it. So that you're absolutely correct. It did not exist, but this is a part of his new economic plan to create a government efficiency committee or commission, and he's going to tap Elon and Vivek, I guess I'm saying his name right, Ramaswamy, to head those that commission. So yes, we have to be very mindful and very tuned in to what his plans are for his should he take office in January. I'm saying he's the president-elect. I know that the Harris-Walz campaign is talking about an audit of the election results. I'm not certain where they are in the process of doing so, but as it stands right now, he is the president-elect, and upon his inauguration, he's going to seat all of these people in all of these positions that he's either creating or he's going to dismantle and put something else in its place.
Doc, let me jump in for a second. And I learned this quite some time ago, and I think it's extremely important that you understand that. Oftentimes when we take a look at candidates and we're saying, well, what this person has said or what this person hasn't said, while that's important, I think there's something that's much more important in that. When a decision is being made by some elected official, look to see who the last person in the room is before they make that decision. That tends to be the person that they listen to. So whether you say it or you don't say it, if you're being fed information and that information is coming from a particular person who comes from a particular ideology, you can pretty much determine or get a pretty good idea as to what that person is actually going to do. We talked a few minutes ago about Elon Musk and how the government efficiency commission. What that does is that can affect every particular department in the entire federal government. If you say, well, there's something that's going on in the Department of Education and I have an issue with that, well, that can affect that. If there's something going on in the Secretary of State's office, I can affect that. If there's something that's going on with Health and Human Services, I can affect that. So technically, if you have someone who's feeding you information, that can apply across all branches of government.
Listen, if you're just joining us, we have been talking in depth about President-elect Donald Trump's appointments to his cabinet or appointments to head certain governmental agencies that he's either going to create or dismantle and create something different. The number here is 504-582-9422 if you want to join in on the conversation. But on the other side of the break, we're going to talk to Dr. Silas Lee about the post-election reflection, that and a whole lot more. WBOK 1230 a.m.
What New Orleans is talking about.
WBOK 1230 a.m. New Orleans. Home of the Good Morning Show, 7 to 9 a.m. weekdays.
This news report is brought to you by New Schools for New Orleans.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. President-elect Trump has chosen Pete Hegseth, a Fox News host and former Army National Guard infantry captain, as defense secretary, praising him as tough, smart, and a true believer in America first. President Biden will host President-elect Trump at the White House today. According to a White House statement, the two are set to meet in the Oval Office at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Wanted posters have been appearing on the University of Rochester campus in Rochester, New York, featuring Jewish faculty members and accusing them of war crimes related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, causing alarm among some on campus. And the Cowboys will be without their franchise quarterback for the rest of the season. Dallas owner and general manager Jerry Jones confirmed that quarterback Dak Prescott is set to undergo season-ending surgery to repair the partial avulsion of his hamstring. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
New Schools for New Orleans, along with Allstate Sugar Bowl and Entergy New Orleans, would like to send a huge congratulations to our class of 2024 New Orleans Excellence in Teaching Award honorees. This year, we had 90 Teachers of the Year from each public school in New Orleans. Each of them was recognized at our annual gala, where we had over 350 attendees. We're excited to also share that each honoree is receiving a $1,000 classroom grant. Thank you for everything you do, teachers.
Good morning, wake up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
Show.
Good morning.
I am your
Good
host,
morning.
Dr. Ashanta Wyatt, and in studio with me is
Senator Wesley Bishop.
Behind the glass, holding us all together is super producer Nyron Sanders, and as promised, we have the Dr. Silas Lee on the phone to talk about post-election reflection. Welcome to the Good Morning Show, Dr. Lee.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
You sure?
Just waiting for everything to start. You know how that is.
Absolutely.
Come January the 20th.
I could not wait to have this conversation with you because I do know you have a brain for this sort of thing. So let's talk about it. We, if you didn't hear our conversation prior to your call, we were talking about President-elect Donald Trump's appointments of certain people to his cabinet and to head certain departments that he's creating or either dismantling to create something different. What are your thoughts on that, about this idea of him dismantling the Department of Education?
One, I'm not too surprised at all, but this plays into the playbook of authoritarian rulers, whereby they are anti-intellectualism, anti-education. They have to create a framework or structure, I should say, whereby people are not inclined to, one, seek authentic views as well as divergent views. And it's interesting how they want to limit access to education in order to maintain this idea, this concept of false superiority. The purpose of education is, we tell people to, in a democracy, to think freely. However, this is the type of democracy where it has the title of what we call a Herrenvolk democracy, freedom for very few, a special entitled group of people, and everyone else just has to fall in line. So the Department of Education is critical to the survival of any, especially in America. When you look at our status worldwide, in reference to the educational attainment of students, we are not in the top 10 in terms of student performance, preparation in many ways. So it's ironic that you want to eliminate a department that's critical to the stability and the prosperity of this nation. But we have to keep in mind that there are ulterior motives as to why this is being done.
So, Dr. Lee, what, in your expertise, are the implications of acquiescing to the state in terms of education? Because he's talking about giving the rights of education to the states? What are the implications of that?
Well, we know the implication. When anytime you turn it back to the states, all states are not equal. They don't have the same resources. They have different philosophies. Think about what happened during Reconstruction and when we had the Civil War. So you're looking at institutionalizing another level of inequality from my experience on how this will work. Look at the different resources states have. California, New York, Texas, compared to Alabama and Arkansas. So turning it back over to the states, that you don't have a standardized, not just formula, but structure to ensure some type of educational conformity and equity. And that's been a major problem, not just with what Trump is trying to do, but with every administration, there's been a change in the philosophy of how we should pursue and implement various goals for education. You remember during I think it was the Bush years, there was the Common Core emphasis. And where did that go? Nowhere. So you're looking at turning it over to the states, you're looking at more inequity. It's already not equal. I would see a greater penetration of educational inequality in terms of resources, programs, and preparation.
Dr. Lee, a couple of questions for you. One, we've talked a little bit about the situation whereby you have individuals who are now looking at when they're hearing that what the President-elect Trump is attempting to do or wanting to do, and how that, and they're concerned about, I guess, buyer's remorse and want to know how they can in fact change their votes. In your view, how does voter sentiment post-election compare to pre-election polling, and were there any surprises or significant discrepancies that you did not anticipate?
Pre-election polling, need to clear some, I think, misconceptions that some people have about it. What we see in the media, that's always what we call a public polls. And those polls were basically horse race. They asked about some association of the candidates with various issues. However, the internal polls, which is what we do a lot of, is in reference to the strategy as well as what we call opposition research on the candidates as well as the clients. And what I noticed with the public polls that we saw, when it got down to the point a week out, 2 weeks out, and it was tied in the battleground states in particular, and I was paying attention to Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and definitely
Michigan,
Georgia, Michigan and Georgia too, because we have to be careful not to compare what happened 2024 with 2020. 2020 was a completely different political environment post-COVID, as well as the activism in some states like Georgia. You had Stacey Abrams, you had two Democrats running for Senate, very competitive Senate seat, but you also had the incumbent U.S. Senator in Georgia who owned the Atlanta Dream, Loeffler, I think was her name, and she was a strong supporter of Trump. Mm-hmm. And the team, remember, came out against her and campaigned for Warnock. So you had more energy, more focus. And in 2024, it was scary in the sense that people started to embrace Trump. And unfortunately, the Harris campaign did not effectively and in a very robust manner remind voters of the Trump years and the inadequacies and the failures of the Trump years. And that is why a lot of people engaged in this remorse, whereby they thought, oh, I got to check, things were better, but they didn't show the counterbalance to that. And I always tell clients, you cannot expect people to interpret policy. You have to guide them through the process. To Trump's credit, you know what he did? For the past 8 years, he has been campaigning. Very consistent theme. One, it was stolen. to you, not better off. And when Vice President Harris talked about her vision, she had to do a more effective job. One, of translating it, two, of saying what she would do differently, and three, taking people, voters, into a new arena as to why this is going to specifically hurt you in reference to the policies of the administration and the entire political and social culture, the climate it would create.
So Dr. Lee, how do you expect voters to react to key priorities set by the new administration? Are there areas where public support could shift quickly?
Oh, yes, indeed. Once people start to feel the impact, see, everything has been hypothetical, and it's a good sales job in terms of telling people, I will do it better. You notice in his advertisements, it wasn't focused on working together, we can do this. In his ads, it specifically said, Trump will fix it. So in terms of getting people reactivated, the campaign really begins after the election, because now people will begin to experience and come out of this fantasy that they had. And that means more civic engagement, a greater need for mobilization, and that not just traditional but non-traditional means, and making people more aware of how this will impact you. That was the downside, I think, where people were not informed sufficiently as to how they would be directly impacted. That simply means this is what you're going to lose.
So what do you think about this buyer's remorse that a lot of because there's a trending, when you Google stuff enough and you search it enough, it becomes a trend. And there's this trend about how do I change my votes, or can I change my vote? What do you think in terms of what they were sold and what they're actually getting?
Well, people were hungry for a change. And, even before Biden dropped out, all the polls were very consistent in the research. People did not want to see a rematch of Biden and Trump. Now, in terms of buyer's remorse, well, you can't change your vote.
Right.
The election is over. I'm sorry that he even got into the atmosphere, but that's just, it's not like buying some clothes from the department store and saying, I want to bring it back. So in terms of buyer's remorse, this is where organizations, community engagement groups, and various what we call affinity groups will have to be very visible, very vigilant in articulating the social impact of these policies. And that's why I said the campaign may be over, but the desire for people to become engaged, two, remain connected to the process is going to be very intense.
Doc, I'd like to get your thoughts, particularly during the latter days and weeks of this campaign. You saw a lot of conversation that focused on black men. And what my thoughts were was that you had a situation whereby in the event that the vice president would have won this lost the election, laying the blame at black men as that being the reason why she wasn't able to be elected. Can you give your thoughts on that and what you thought about that when you saw this national conversation begin to happen?
That was a misguided conversation, for one, and it was disingenuous to try to blame the loss or the lack of support that she was experiencing exclusively at the feet of black men. 2020, 2016, we see a trend. The majority of white women supported Trump. It happened in 2016. We saw in 2024 and 2020. And if you put all African-American voters together, especially black men, it would not have been enough. So we have to, don't fall for this trick of misleading us into thinking that we are to blame. Yes, the okey-doke, that blaming us for what has happened. The reality is that white women have historically supported white men. And there was a false illusion being presented that you had a solid white vote out there whereby with white women in particular, husbands would vote Trump or boyfriends, and they would support Kamala Harris. Well, that didn't necessarily happen. You notice there was a lot of split ticket support. In 7 battleground states, abortion rights amendments passed, but Trump won. That's completely hypocritical. So that tells me they were concerned in protecting the rights of women, but there was an indoctrinated fear of electing an African American Asian woman to become the most powerful person, not only in the nation, but in the world. She had her hands on the levers of power for the next 4 years, and there was a lot of fatigue, racism and sexism tied to this that has a historical dimension to it.
So given the political climate following the 2024 election, what changes do you foresee in national policies or governance over the next few years?
Well, definitely, I would say the Democrats as well as progressive groups that support inclusion, diversity, democracy, all those themes you heard during the campaign, they will have to restructure how they compete and communicate in an environment, influence not only an environment, but now you have an entire apparatus influenced by Trump and the MAGA ideology. That's what you're looking at right now, where the ideology, unlike 2016 in particular, he knows where to attack and focus. Look at the people he's appointing, and they have a playbook. 2016, he didn't have a playbook. 2024, playbook is Project 2025. That's been in the works for several years. Multi-institutional book that will direct policies as to implementing an agenda to reverse all of the progress that we saw in the past 2 decades.
Dr. Lee, when we drill down on that and look at it as far as the state of Louisiana, how do you see what's going on with the national election with President-elect Trump and many of the appointments that we've made? We've talked a little bit about states' rights and what the Vice President-elect now saying that there are certain things that he wants to put and have the states to take a look at it. And we've talked in particular about the State Department of Education. How do you see that playing here in the state of Louisiana, and what changes might you see in anticipation of the appointments that's being made?
Well, the changes will definitely, the state will follow the lead of the national party as well as of the Trump. So therefore, you will see a cutback. You already saw it with many of the equity and inclusion initiatives. You see it in reference to limiting the rights of women and reference to access to abortion. You also will see it in reference to limiting access to health care. You see right now they're looking at ways to restrict and improving or protecting people from environmental issues that impact the state, specifically in areas where you have poor and minority populations. So you will see them following and implementing what the national government dictates. In some ways, more aggressively, they will try.
Well, Dr. Lee, you know, it's always a pleasure to pick your brain, and we thank you for being with us. Is there a takeaway that you want to leave us with before we have to let you go?
Yeah, well, definitely the takeaway is, one, we have to mobilize and maintain engaged in terms of counteracting what they are going to try to propose. And this will be proposed on the national level, but also on the state and local levels. In some states and localities, it will be much more aggressive due to the fact that we have a supermajority in the legislature of Louisiana and a Republican administration in terms of the executive branch. You can see where this is going and the need to counter aggressively through coalitions, that means the diverse coalitions in our communities, in reference to combating what Trump wants to implement, which will be in sync with what the governor and the legislature wants to implement. And we've only seen the beginning of this. We heard about education, but be prepared for climate, be prepared for educational issues, as I mentioned. Social Security is on the chopping block, and there are many other initiatives that will be disguised as we need to protect access for all. And that's always a code word. Access for all means the exclusion of some, us in particular, as to how they will proceed in implementing this very regressive agenda.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Silas Lee, for your insight and your expertise. And as always, you're always welcome here if you want to have a more in-depth conversation. Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Okay, you're welcome. All right.
Have a great one. Listen, stay with us. We're going to be in conversation with Dr. Jalandra Rivera, talking about mental health and the psyche, especially post-election, right here on WBOK 1230 AM.
What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long.
NOLA Public Schools' main round enrollment for kindergarten through 12th grade is now open. With 73 schools available through the NOLA Public Schools Common Application Process, or NCAP, finding the right school fit for your family is easier than ever. List up to 12 choices to maximize your chances and apply by January 24th. We're all in, and we hope you are too. Apply today at enrollnolaps.com. That's enrollnolaps.com.
Hi, it's Dr. Shepard with Honeydew Products, here with your Medical Minute. Did you know the average American woman uses about 168 chemicals every day? Common soaps, shampoos, conditioners, and makeup all include prominent and known toxins. These include sodium lauryl sulfate, 2,5-diamine toluene sulfate, PEG3 cocamide, formaldehyde, decamethylcyclopentasiloxane, and chemical fragrances. However, the risk of being exposed to these chemicals is higher for Black women. Allow me to quote a study from environmental research. Hair products used by Black women and children contain multiple chemicals associated with endocrine disruption and asthma. Because use of hair products differs by race and ethnicity, these products may contribute to exposure and disease disparities. They tested 66 chemicals belonging to 10 chemical classes. The hair products tested contained 45 endocrine disrupting and asthma associated chemicals, including every targeted chemical class. They found cyclosiloxanes, paraben, and fragrance marker diethylphthalate, DEP, at the highest levels, and DEP most frequently. Root stimulators, hair lotions, and relaxers frequently contain non-phenols, parabens, and fragrances. Anti-frizz products contain cyclosiloxanes. Hair relaxers for children contain 5 chemicals regulated by California's Proposition 65 that were also prohibited by the European Union Cosmetics Regulation. Targeted chemicals were generally not listed on product labels. To learn more about healthy hair and healthy hair products, give me a call. It's 504-858-4696.
This has been your Medical Minute with Honeydew Products on WBOK.
If you're over 75 or 60 plus with certain health conditions, you're at higher risk for severe RSV disease. Protect yourself with an RSV vaccine. Risk less, do more. Get started at vaccines.gov. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. In the studio with me this morning is
Senator Wesley Bishop.
Behind the glass, holding it all together, super producer Nyron Sanders. And I want to thank again Dr. Silas Lee for his insight and his expertise post-election to give us some insight and to reflect on where we are and where we're going. But right now, on the phone with us, we have Dr. Jill Rivera. She's going to talk all things mental health and psyche, particularly in this post-election climate.
Good morning, Dr. Rivera.
Good morning, Dr. Jill. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, you're always welcomed here. So thank you for being here. I don't know how much of the conversation you heard with our previous guest, Dr. Silas Lee, but we were talking all things post-election. And I know mental health is right up in the mix because some of us are not well right now in the wake of the presidential results. So we need your expertise now more than ever. So in the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election, how do you think political events are impacting the mental health of students, particularly in higher education settings? Are there specific concerns you're seeing more of since the election results?
We are seeing more. Let me just preface it by letting you know I am no longer in that environment. I have served in that environment for about 30 years, and have decided to pursue something a little different. But I can let you know from my experience over time, particularly when Trump was first elected president, it was chaos in the student environment. The student environment, university settings, college settings are just microcosms of the larger society. So what we see in the larger society, we tend to see within these university settings. And so there were segregated activities. There was lots of racial hatred, just as students across the country are receiving these anonymous text messages about being picked up to go to the plantation for work. Those sorts of behaviors are seen within the university environment. It is not about plantation per se, but it is about, you can't come to our residence halls, or you're no longer invited here. You cannot be a part of the club. We're now going to take back what you've taken from us. And so it was a lot of heightened fear. There was a lot of fear around ICE. There were a lot of undocumented students who ran to our offices to be consoled because they were afraid that they were going to be deported, that persons would come to their homes and take them. And they looked for these universities to be safe havens for them. So they wanted protection. They fought against administration because they wanted the administration to verbally and out loudly articulate protection for them to the country. And of course, administrators kind of resisted that particular tactic, not the protection of the students, but the modality in which they wanted the administrators to protect them. So it was a lot of chaos. Again, my assumption is the university environment is the same. Persons are afraid, they are fearful of the rhetoric that Donald Trump has made during the election of what he was going to do. And now that he is in office, there is heightened fear, heightened anxiety, and heightened stress around that.
And so, Doc, during your time, I guess, and looking back and having had a chance to see, I guess, a Trump administration, and when you talk about what's going on particularly college levels and the impact that they're actually having, what does that do, or what does that say, I guess, to the day-to-day psyche of students who are on a university campus, who went to that university with the idea that they were going to be protected and be able to live out their God-given dreams and trying to make that happen? How does that deal with the day-to-day mindset of those students who are in that?
It produced a lot of fear. it produced a heightened sense of, I won't call it conspiracy theories, but a heightened sense of feeling unprotected and questioning everything that the administration did or at the time, and I would imagine will do in the future, which is why a lot of work towards protecting marginalized people came about, because there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of accusations around what administrators accepted Trump's policies and which did not. And so there were a lot of student uprising. There was a great demand for more mental health resources. They wanted to be protected in the sense that they wanted to have whatever fears or anxieties they were feeling, they wanted someone to help them to process that. So in the college university setting, there are only X amount of mental health therapists present with the charge to cover all students. So you can't give students unlimited care, any one student unlimited care, because it then infringes upon your ability to meet the mental health needs of other students. So there was an uprising around, you need to staff the mental health unit better. You need to make sure that there are people within the unit who look like me. So I want to see African Americans, I want to see Asians, I want to see LGBTQ plus therapists. I don't want to just see white therapists, mental health therapists. So it really empowered students. So students felt empowered to fight the administration. And in many instances, it became students against the administration. And the administration, and I say this cautiously because I can't speak for all institutions, but the administrators were careful not to depict themselves as the enemy of the students or as one who lent into the ideology that the Trump administration was perpetuating. So they were walking a real fine line and didn't really know how to negotiate or to navigate through those situations.
So in addition to the election, we've seen various unfortunate events such as natural disasters, economic instability, and societal unrest take a toll on the mental health of folk. How do you manage the overlap of these crises and the mental health needs of students who are simultaneously dealing with multiple stressors?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good question. In 2023, 23% of students or just adults in general experience mental illness, more so than that previous year. And about 5%, that's like 13 million people reported having serious thoughts of suicide. And so there are not enough mental health therapists in the country, let alone on these university campuses, to really deal with the heightened sense of thoughts of death by suicide. We had, and I'm not going to mention the institution, but there were several institutions, I'll just say this, that had multiple suicides, completed suicides in the environment during the Trump administration. And they had many students who had thoughts of suicide. So it was just a hopelessness. And so the only way to really care for these students, whenever you have trauma, whatever coping mechanisms that you have in place to help you to manage your everyday life in face of your trauma, your historical trauma, all go away. They melt away. Your ability to hold on to that in the face of a new trauma is slim to none. And so if I could just go back to Hurricane Katrina, when Hurricane Katrina hit, that was a new trauma for New Orleanians. And whatever coping mechanisms students had to repress past traumas were stripped away by that current trauma. And so that is the case. That's going to be the case. That was the case in Trump's past presidential candidacy or run, and it will be again in this upcoming one. And so there are not enough mental health therapists. I guess that's the point that I want to make. And so there's a shortage. And so universities have to partner with organizations, have to partner with community providers, which is why I kind of stepped out of the arena. So in the mental health space within these college and university settings, we cannot meet all of the mental health needs of the student body. Some of them come with so severe past trauma that they're just trying to focus on their education, and we're helping them to successfully matriculate through this educational environment. But we can't do that for everyone. We can't do that alone. So we've partnered and with the environment, with community health providers, but it hasn't always been successful because, they have their own caseloads. Proximity is an issue. Now, since we've gone with telehealth, we can spread the care across many providers within the state, not just within the circumference of the university. So I have stepped out and formulated an organization that's called I Will Till I'm Well, where we have 25,000 mental health therapists to help students around the country to call in to get mental health care in the moment, right? So we've gotten students 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning who had anxiety attacks over what's going to happen on their tomorrows, and they had no one to talk to. So I just felt a need to provide this kind of care. So we have mental health therapists that can talk to you 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, any day of the year, Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, whenever you're having a crisis, because we understand the importance of mental health and how you need good mental health to survive, particularly to survive the potential rhetoric of a dictator coming into office.
Dr. Viveros, in your experience, what signs should universities, educators, and other mental health professionals be aware of to identify students who may need that additional help?
Sure. So what's going to happen is we're going to see a lot of fear, a lot of stress. So fear, stress, we helped professors to look at the writings of students. So what is it that they're writing? What's the content of their paper? Are they talking about gun violence? Are they talking about stress, anxiety? Are they talking about exhibiting forms of abuse? So we not only have to look at those who are the recipients of abuse, but those who might be givers of it, right? So are students writing about hatred? Are they writing about killing? Are they writing about death or thoughts of suicide? So these are the signs that, so professors are gatekeepers. They are the first, in many instances, to lay eyes on these students, especially the upperclassmen that don't have like orientation sessions. So the faculty members are gatekeepers. They can understand when a student is moving away from his or her baseline behaviors. So is this student becoming more anxious? Are they crying because they can't meet an assignment? That's not the typical behavior of this particular student. So any kind of heightened level or levels of mental health behaviors that are atypical for the student or incongruent for what's happening in the environment or atypical to the classroom or the classroom environment. They need to establish good relationships with the mental health units within these universities. They need to have the mental health providers come and talk to their students periodically to remind them of the services. They need to really help to normalize help-seeking behaviors, right? So it's okay to talk to someone about what it is you're feeling. There are also lots of organizations that are available to institutions that talk about high-risk behaviors, right? So there are organizations that help the mental health staff and the administrators of universities to dissect students' paperwork, to understand there are rubrics that we used to follow to give points to any type of gun violence or sexual violence or racial violence mentioned in papers. And then we just bring students in and we talk to them about their papers. And so it's those kinds of behaviors, anxieties, fears, verbals that are atypical, any kind of mention of hatred or hatred of any kind of marginalized groups being highly sensitive to the verbals of another that may not have necessarily targeted them, but they felt targeted. So it's these sorts of behaviors that faculty members, administrators, and counselors alike need to really pay attention to in this university environment.
So as the director overseeing multiple student health and wellness services, how are you and your team preparing for a potential rise in mental health concerns after the election? Are there specific strategies or programs you're implementing to support students? And listen, and faculty as well, the question was focused on students, but I'm certain that there are some faculty members who could also benefit from some health and wellness services post-election.
Right. So let me tell you some of the programs that exist in these university settings. So the mental health counselors partner with educational units, and they meet regularly with administrators to get a pulse on what's happening to the psyche of students. And then they go into the classroom, they have educational talks with the students, they have roundtable discussions with the students, they have groups that are, and here's something important, the name of a group is a mental health group is extremely important. And so we're careful to name a group with a level of transparency that will give students some insight or some input into what will be discussed to help them to decide whether or not that's what they want to talk about. And then we give a blurb of what the group's agendas are. So those are things that they're doing. We also interview with students. We also formulate different student groups. So we partner with students and student organizations so that we have eyes and ears on all of the students. We meet with administrators to help administrators to be sensitive in their language, to be sensitive with any kind of letters or information that's going out to parents, that are going out to students. We're staffing up the units. We're trying to hire more psychologists, more psychiatrists to help. We're partnering with the community to have some telehealth services available for students. We are having services where students can call in for, like I said, that on-demand kind of counseling, to speak with the counselor right away. So we have counselors on standby, just in case a student has an emergency. We're talking to faculty members and letting them know that if a student has any kind of mental health breakdown within the classroom, don't penalize them, walk them over to our unit if you can. Leave your classroom to walk them over. If not, to get an escort to bring them. We have security officers who are kind in their posture and in their mannerisms to meet with students, to bring them to us. We're online after hours. So if a student is on a rooftop or if a student is having a mental breakdown, we're on standby waiting to talk to that student. So it is a very compassionate environment for the mental well-being of students during this time.
Listen, we're in conversation with Dr. Jill Rivera, talking all things mental health, particularly post-election. If you want to join the conversation, a number here is 504-582-9422. We will have more with Dr. Jill on the other side of the break. This is WBOK 1230 AM.
What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long.
This is your news update for WBOK 1230 AM from WDSU. For all your news and weather, watch WDSU News, New Orleans' leader in live, local, late-breaking news. Today at noon and 4 p.m.
Today is a WDSU first warning weather impact day. There's a chance for showers and thunderstorms late morning into early evening. Some of these could be on the strong to severe side, and we could possibly see flooding, low threat for tornadoes and strong winds. Highs will make it into the low 80s. After that, a cold front moves in late tonight into early Thursday, putting us near seasonal temperatures for the end of the week. For the WDSU First Warning Weather Center, I'm Raven Richard.
An official message from Medicare.
Medicare plans change from one year to the next. And this year, it's important for you to review your current coverage and compare all your options during Medicare open enrollment. Compare health plans, drug coverage, and costs. See if you can save some money, and don't forget to make sure your drugs are covered. Open enrollment ends December 7th. Visit Medicare.gov or call 1-800-MEDICARE.
Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Metropolitan Human Services District wants to remind you that treatment is effective and everyone can recover. If you are looking for a recovery program and you live in the Orleans, St. Bernard, or Plaquemines Parish, visit mhsdla.org or call 504-568-3130. Recovery is possible, and MHSD is here to help. Metropolitan Human Services District, where we change lives.
Tune in to The Monitor's Mic, where we talk about oversight, policing, and you. Hosted by the Office of Independent Police Monitor, we're here to shine a light on policing issues that matter, from real-time policing updates to in-depth interviews. Every Friday at noon on WBOK.
The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation is the nonprofit organization that owns the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival presented by Shell. With the funds generated from Jazz Fest, the foundation invests in Louisiana communities through economic development, cultural enrichment, and free educational programs. To learn more about the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, please visit us at www.jazzandheritage.org.
Join Inspire NOLA Charter Schools, Freddie King, Hancock Whitney, Six War Steppers, and more for 2 NOLA Love Drive-Thru Turkey and Ham giveaways. On Tuesday, November 26th, the first giveaway begins at 9 a.m. in Algiers at Alice Hart Charter School. And the second giveaway begins at 2 p.m. in historic Treme at the Mahalia Jackson Theater. Receive a free turkey or ham and food items while supplies last. We'll see you there. Learn more at inspirenolaschools.org.
Visit DePaul's new Algiers Health Center at 2801 General de Gaulle Drive to receive primary and preventive care for both adults and children. Services also include behavioral health, imaging, and on-site pharmacy, vision, Medicaid enrollment assistance, and more. For appointments, visit DePaulCommunityHealthCenters.org or call 504-207-3060. Hey everybody, it's Kimber White Dupree.
And it's Graylin Bryant Banks from the front porch. We're coming up next.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. In studio with me this morning is
Senator Wesley Bishop.
And behind the glass holding us down is super producer Nyron Sanders. We are in conversation with Dr. Jill Rivera, talking all things mental health, particularly in the wake of our election 2024. So welcome back, Dr. Jill.
Thank you.
Listen, I guess my question would be, looking ahead, what trends in student mental health are you anticipating, especially post-election? How do you foresee your role evolving in response to the new administration and its potential impact on the campus environment?
So roles such as mine, I'll answer the second part first. Roles such as mine are important to keep the administration, the upper administration or the upper administrators aware of the psychological trends that we're seeing within the center. So we have a pulse on what the students are thinking, how suicidal their thoughts are, what's the mental health alignment of the university. Many of the faculty members and many administrators, to be honest, look at the university setting as an educational institution solely, and that's okay. But you know, the mental health of the student determines whether or not they're going to have a good retention rate or poor retention rate. So are they retaining? And many of these students don't drop out because they're not intellectually able or educationally prepared. It's because of mental health concerns. So our role as administrator is to always tell the university what it needs in the mental health realm to adequately meet the needs of the students so that they can successfully matriculate through the educational environment to graduation and beyond. So that's our role. With the wake of this potential dictatorial regime, what you're going to find in the student body that we're going to keep a pulse on. I know this kind of blends into to the question you asked earlier as well, but it's going to include students will have increased anxieties and fears and lots of stress. So they're going to have like a constant fear of repression. They're going to have a constant fear that somebody's watching them. They are not going to know if they're being punished for their paper or if it's being adequately graded or assessed. So there's going to be a lot of chronic stress and anxiety around. There's going to be an erosion of trust. So they're not going to trust the system, and they may not even trust us as therapists. So it's going to be really important to formulate new lines or inroads of trust with those students, because this kind of leadership is a synonym to an erosion of trust. So it destroys that trust between people in relationships. It heightens a sense of social isolation. So students who are socially isolating, we have to really keep our hands on them, because it speaks to their mental health, their mental well-being, as well as the well-being of the community and the bonds of the community. They're breaking down, and so we need to really look at that and keep our eyes on it. The other thing is a sense of learned helplessness. Like students will have a lack of control, or seemingly a lack of control over their own lives and their futures, and they can feel powerless or have a great sense of hopelessness. And so we have to make sure that they have some sense of external locus of control, because they're not going to trust, or internal sense of locus of control, and to establish a healthy sense of external locus of control, meaning finding some outside forces that will help them and support them and to be there for them and just to be a listening ear. So I just ask people to be a listening ear to the students. Don't be quick to judge them. They're going to have some internalized oppression or sense of oppression, where there's chronic stress or living under this constant stress or under oppression will impair their memory. So they may not be able to remember as many assignments or principles or theories that they did in the past. They may not be able to plan as well. They may not have as much self-control in their abilities to perform. And so you're going to see some of that. And that, we see some of that in poverty, right? And lack of opportunities. But under some dictatorships, it's heightened. You're going to see a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD. So, the violence that we saw in the previous term, we're still trying to wrestle with some of that. The police brutality, and especially if Trump gives immunity to police officers for killing people, our state of violence is going to increase, and the trauma and the PTSD around that will increase. Already high, it's going to increase. And then moral injury, right? So many people might be feeling forced to act against their own values, or to witness atrocities that, can lead to even deeper psychological wounds. There's this concept called vicarious trauma that was written by a psychologist by the name of Judith Herman, and she talks about vicarious trauma. So I may not be the one that's being beaten or being shot or being abused, but I'm witnessing it. And so I am equally as traumatized in a different way, and that's called secondary or vicarious trauma. So we're going to have a lot of that from this authoritarian personality that will be in the White House. And so you're going to get like intolerance for ambiguity. So we may mimic some of that. We might get some rigid thinking. We may become even real submissive to authority figures because we are afraid. Now, all of this will exist in the environment, but it's going to exist in the community. I mean, in university environment, it's going to exist in the country as well. Remember, the university is just a microcosm of the larger society. And then, lastly, what comes to mind is a sense of loss of autonomy and critical thinking. Censorship and propaganda can impair one's ability to engage in independent thought or independent decision making. And so students might feel like, oh no, what to do with this assignment? I'm failing, I'm a failure. We already get, under normal circumstances, students who get all A's and get a B and feel like they're a failure because they've gotten a B. How many of us would just love, like, oh God, just give me a B? But some of these high-performing students do not know how to cope with anything less than what their standard is for success. So under these circumstances, it's just going to be a heightened sense of all of what I've just mentioned.
Well, Dr. Jill, is there anything you want to leave our listening audience with before we have to let you go?
Stay strong. As a society, as a country, we think nothing of telling someone who has a headache or a broken limb or high blood pressure, whatever, to go to the doctor. Just go to the doctor. But someone who's suffering with anxiety and depression, we just think we can reason with them. Any person, any lay person can sit and talk to them and reason with them and help them through it. That is a fallacy. That's not real. Mental health therapists go to school. I went to school for nearly 10 years to learn the theories of psychology and to help people to process healthy thinking. And so we have to, as a culture, tear down this stigma and allow people to walk in good mental health and to help them to understand there's nothing wrong with going to speak to someone who's trained in the theories of personalities and mental wellness, to go and talk to them. We have to stop people from isolating and hiding behind a wall of good mental health when they're not in a good place and they just need someone to help them think. It is important the way we think inside of our heads, and we problem solve around things that are inside our heads is very different than articulating that thought out loud and problem solving that thought once you hear it. So when you hear your thought, you hear, hey, you know what? I'm not doing well today. I don't feel like I'm up to par. My thinking is off. I'm going to process that differently if I just think that in my head versus me articulating it. And the problem-solving skills, research shows, are better when we verbalize them. That's the power of talk therapy. We talk those things out and process them. So I encourage everyone to allow people to seek the help that they need until they feel like they're well, which is the whole point of the whole definition of the organization that I formed. I will till I'm well. So I will seek the help that I need until I'm well. So we need to empower people to take care of themselves.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jill, for your insight and your expertise. Hopefully you can come back and see us really soon, but we want to thank you for joining us this morning. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I was a little verbose, but
no worries. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Listen, we want to thank both of our guests, Dr. Silas Lee, who walked us through post-election reflection, and Dr. Jalandra Rivera talking about all things mental health and psyche post-election. I want to also tell you guys about the New Orleans United Front's monthly town hall meeting, which will take place Monday, November 18th, 2024, 5 to 7 p.m. Cafe Istanbul, 2372 St. Claude Avenue, in the Healing Center. I will be your moderator, and I will be in conversation with the New Orleans Independent Police Monitor, talking about the New Orleans Police Department's consent decree featuring victims of the NOPD cover-ups. Refreshments will be served, and for more information, you can contact Miss Alicia Plummer at 504-458-5809. I want to thank you for joining us this morning, and I want to invite you to the front porch. Up next, we're Graylin and Kimba. This is WBOK 1230 AM.
What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Goodbye.